squishy squares, the block stitch, or the main body of the blanket. This video is going to demonstrate how you do the block stitch along with the seed stitch side edges. All right, you have finished your row 6. Oops, I did finish my row 6. And now we start on the main body of the blanket. You will have indicated, if you are a beginner, your right side versus your wrong side. So I'm going to do that now, pretending I am a beginner, because I once was. Okay, so we start by resetting the counter. If you've been using it, it's absolutely acceptable to reset it, because we're now starting another section and it's starting back at row 1. So there I am at zeros. Okay, so row 1, right side, I know that, and it's starting with an edge stitch. You can see that because it's that SL1KW, slip 1 knitwise. Okay, so we're going to slip 1 knitwise, that's the edge stitch. Then you knit 1, purl 1 2 times. All right, knit 1, purl 1 once, knit 1, purl 1 twice. Then it asks you to PM, or place a marker. Why? That is for you to remind yourself that this is edge stitch and seed stitch border, and after this marker it is now block stitch. All right, block stitch. Block stitch is done by knit 4, purl 4, and repeat that in the case of your size blanket 8 times. I'm making a little miniature one. I'm only going to have to do it once, but so you would knit 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you would purl 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you would just repeat that over and over 8 times. That was once, and you repeat that 8 times. Basically, you're repeating that until you have 5 stitches left at the end, but it should be 8 times. So for me, because I'm at the end, I'll continue on. You would keep going until you've done that 8 times, or until you have 5 stitches left. And then it says PM, place marker again. All right, I put a marker on it. Perfect. And then it says knit 1, purl 1 2 times. So we knit 1, purl 1, that's once, knit 1, purl 1, that is twice, and you knit 1. And now I take my row counter, or you're going to forget where you are, and I have finished row 1. Row 2. First you're doing your edge stitch, which is that SL1PW, or slip 1 purlwise. Perfect. And then you're doing your seed stitch border. Now as you get experience in your knitting, you won't even need to follow that part of the pattern, because you'll know by looking at this that you have to purl 1 right away. But if you're following the pattern, then it would say purl 1, knit 1 2 times. So I would do that, purl 1, knit 1, that's once, purl 1, knit 1, that's twice. I've hit the marker, I just slide it over. That's a key signal for you now that you're into the block stitch pattern. So that part of it now is knit 4, purl 4, 8 times. Okay, so we're gonna 1, 2, 3, 4 knits and 4 purls. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's once. I would need to repeat. I need to repeat that, so I've done it 8 times, or basically until you get to that lovely stitch marker. These are very helpful. It takes thought out of the process. So once you hit the end, you hit your stitch marker, and that is when you're doing your seed stitch, or on the pattern, it's purl 1, knit 1 2 times, purl 1, knit 1 once, purl 1, knit 1 twice, and I have 1 stitch left, and I am to purl that 1 stitch. And that is row 2. Now row 3, what do? You do the same as row 1. Row 4, what do? You do the same as row 2. Row 5, you do the same as row 1. Row 6, you do the same as row 2. So basically you're repeating that row 1 and row 2 a few times. So you just keep repeating that. So I'll pick it up once I've finished row 6. I have finished row 6 of the main body, and now row 7 is where it shifts. So that this particular block stitch is done where you're doing a certain section in 6 rows, and then you do the opposite in the other 6 rows. What does it look like? Larger, like this. You can see the blocks. So I was knitting for 6 rows. I was going knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. And then when I hit row 7, I switch, so it's the opposite. So where I had knitted before, I now purl. And then I go purl, knit, and I do that for 6 rows. And then you just alternate that. That's what gives you that block pattern. So there we are at row 7, and it's going to switch to the opposite. The seed stitch border stays the same. So row 7 is doing your edge stitch with the slip 1 stitch knitwise, done. And then you're going to knit 1, purl 1 2 times, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1. It's the lovely bumpy seed stitch border. Okay, and then I slip that marker over. Now if I was on row 6, I would knit again, but I'm not. I'm on row 7, so it is time to switch these knits to purls. So now I purl 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and now I knit 4, whereas before I had purled 4, so now I knit 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pass that marker over. Finish with your seed stitch border, which is knit, purl, knit, purl, and knit. That is your row 7. And row 8, of course you're doing it in a larger scale than I am. And then your row 8, because it's just going to be these rows 7 and 8 that repeat 3 times. So your row 8 again is now you're slipping the edge stitch purlwise to give that nice chain up border. Then we do purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, slip it over, and now we just follow the new pattern. So before we were knitting and purling, now you can see those bumps because now we're doing a purl knit pattern. So we're purling for 4, opposite of that block that was down below, and then we're knitting for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we would end with the seed stitch, and it, whoops, sorry about that, and it just turns into that, right? You are, there's my right side, so I was knitting for 4, purling for 4, I repeat that for 6 rows. Then when I start in row 7, wherever I had knitted, I now purl, and where I had purled before I now knit, and then I repeat that for 6 rows. And then you just go opposite. Every 6 rows you switch. So I use my counter up until I hit row 12, and once I hit row 12, I know I've done a section because that's a section, and then I reset my counter back to a 0, and then I start again with row 1, and that helps me as a beginner to keep track of where I am. So you repeat those 12 rows until your blanket comes as close as possible to 43 inches for the baby size, or for 58 inches for the winter throw size. And I'm saying close because it doesn't have to be so totally exact, but what you have to do is you either have to end on a row 6 or a row 12 so that your block is complete. You don't want to end oh, I'm at 43 inches and I'm in the middle of this block section, so I'll stop. No, that would not be good. So either end on a row 6 or end on a row 12, whatever's closest to those measurements. It doesn't have to be completely exact. Okay, so you end on a row 6 or you end on a row 12 and you continue on. And then when you have finished those 12 rows, or that repeat of the block section, you would end your work by switching back to a seed stitch across the entire top, just as you had started. And you've done that once before. You just repeat those you just repeat those 6 seed stitch rows again, like you had started your blanket with in the first place. And then you cast off, which I will show you how to do in the next video.